Every Saturday at 7:30 a.m. for A View from the Outside, hosted by Brereton Horne. A View from the Outside takes a look at key issues affecting St. Vincent and the Grenadines and gives a global perspective on how these issues are viewed. Host Brereton Horne will examine a variety of topics to enlighten, stimulate debate, and explore solutions. Hear the facts, hear the real-life stories, hear A View from the Outside. Join Brereton Horne at 7:30 a.m. every Saturday on NiceRadio for A View from the Outside.
On A View from the Outside this week, Randy and the listeners, this week being the 26th of May 2018, we focus on lawlessness, 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 with the view being that St. Vincent and the Grenadines appears to be besieged by lawlessness, and every effort must be made to stem that tide to try to save the country and its dwindling image. The Oxford Dictionary defines lawlessness as a state of disorder due to disregard of the law. That's a state of disorder due to a disregard of the law. That definition is simply telling us that when people disregard the law, disorder takes over. Chaos reigns and vigilantism creeps in. The signs of chaos and vigilantism are now evident in St. Vincent and the Grenadines today. Even before the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines gave the current regime the opportunity to govern the country back in 2001, the regime unwittingly promised to make the country ungovernable. Their promise was made back in the late 1990s when they showed by their words and their actions that they would stop at nothing to gain power to rule the country. They effected regime change by what became known as the Roadblock Revolution. From since then to now, the observations have been made and the examples are many and keep growing of what they have been doing and continue to do to undermine and erode the rule of law in the country. They abolished the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, commonly called PACE, P-A-C-E. PACE is a piece of law which governs the way the police ought to behave during an investigation to ensure that the rights are protected. Any government that saw it fit to abolish such a piece of law is sending the message that rights are not important and thus not to be protected. Many say that they, the regime, have deliberately caused fractures among different groups in the society. They have infiltrated the trade unions, which many say that but for one or two are now effectively neutered. They have infiltrated the church, causing division among churches and even amongst church members. That practice has resulted in morality being at an all-time low in the country. They profess love, but they practice hate. They use the public sphere, and many say state resources, to denigrate and belittle men, and especially women who espouse opposite views to theirs. Victimization from any dissenter is now the expected norm. Businesses have been targeted and put out of existence simply because of their perception that the business owner does not support them. Bigger Biggs and his multi-million-dollar business is the prime and living example of this. They have promised much, but they delivered little. They promised to be tough on crime and the causes of crime, yet crime continues to escalate out of control. They participated in and sanctioned the early release of drug dealers and serial rapists. The murder rate hits a record year on year. And for the last 2 calendar years, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, with a population of just over 100,000 people, had at least 40 recorded murders in each of those years. Many people have also simply disappeared without a trace. Mr. Jocelyn, who was affectionately called the servant of the Lord, and who was a fierce critic of the regime, disappeared off the face of the earth, it seems, to be heard of no more. Rape and sexual assaults have reached unbearable proportions, and videos circulating social media that citizens are now resorting to vigilante justice because they feel that the law enforcement authorities in the country are not serving them well. The people see that celebrations and rallies have been held for accused rapists, while the accusers have been shamed and demeaned by representatives of the regime. The people see that some accused rapists, including the current Prime Minister, have not seen the light of day in a court of law. The people feel that justice has two faces. In fact, even some of those who are believed to be part of the upper echelons of the regime have actually acknowledged that justice has two faces in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. One face for the rich and powerful and the well-connected, and one face for those who are not. The people feel that the lines of the separation of powers are blurred. They have become too blurred, and there is too much interference, political interference. People are outraged and disgusted that defenseless and vulnerable young girls, including Yogi Farrell, are treated the way Yogi Farrell has been treated. People simply have reached a point where things have become intolerable. They simply cannot go on. And that simply cannot be good for the country. It sends the message that lawlessness is no longer knocking at the door of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It is here, and it needs to be dealt with. But it cannot be dealt with unless steps are taken to rebuild the trust of the people in the country. It cannot be dealt with when many citizens who live abroad fear that if they return home, even for a holiday, they will be arrested and charged. That bail conditions, if bail is granted, will be imposed on them and their travel documents confiscated so that they cannot return to their family. And in the meantime, they end up losing their job and possibly their accommodation, like Paul Imad Scruggs experienced not too long ago. It cannot be dealt with when police officers who are meant to protect and serve each and every citizen and everyone in the country are made to wear party colors at election campaign and other rallies held by the Unity Labour Party, the ULP, the ruling party in the country. This lawlessness cannot be dealt with when a commissioner of police is adorned in the most flamboyant of ways, in the most flamboyant of colors of the ruling regime at election rallies. It cannot be dealt with when there remain unresolved allegations of election thievery. It cannot be dealt with as long as seemingly bogus excuses continue to be made in respect of human trafficking. It cannot be dealt with unless the Vincentian people are given reports and conclusions of the many investigations which have been promised. These include, but are not limited to, the Deputy Consul General who brought shame on St. Vincent and the Grenadines when he had to leave the consulate in New York in disgrace for allegedly scamming poor Vincentians living in the USA who have been called babysitters and dog walkers out of their hard-earned money for the promise of US green card and passport. Many believe that he is still being shielded by the regime today. Then there's the investigation which was promised into the alleged millions of dollars held in bank accounts overseas by some members of the regime. Vincentians were told by the Prime Minister that the Attorney General was instructed to inform Interpol and the FBI to be part of a thorough investigation. Much time has passed and nothing has been reported since. That lawlessness cannot be dealt with when millions of US dollars in cash are swirling around in the hands of a few who are connected to the regime. It cannot be dealt with when attempts have been made to deposit $1 million US in cash into the Accountant General of St. Vincent, into the account of the Accountant General of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and not even an appearance of an investigation into that. The lawlessness cannot be dealt with when drugs meant to be evidence in a criminal trial, which was in the custody and under the control of the police, go missing and no one appears to be held culpable or accountable. The lawlessness cannot be dealt with when St. Vincent and the Grenadines continues to gain a reputation for being a transshipment point for cocaine, and many of the killings occurring in the country are linked to the drug trade. The lawlessness which has crept in cannot be dealt with until there is genuine accountability to the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Accountability for Petrocarib money, accountability for the construction of the Argyle International Airport, accountability for all, emphasis all, public spending. It cannot be dealt with when all people see is a deliberate manipulation of the process to try to remain in power. It cannot be dealt with when disrespect of citizens, even in the parliament of the country, pervades the land. It cannot be dealt with when such disrespect is also meted out to members of parliament in the House of Parliament, when the most unparliamentary language is used without sanction, it seems. It cannot be dealt with, it cannot be achieved when social justice is at an all-time low. Efforts would have to be made, though, to correct all of those things. Efforts have to be made to rebuild the trust of the people. It cannot and will not be done otherwise. Vincentians, as we embark on the journey to find solutions, to correct the wrongs and the ills which have led to the lawlessness which we now see in our country, we, on a view from the outside, will now adapt the words of Robert Kennedy into our Vincentian context and say, what we need in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is not division. What we need in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is not hatred. What we need in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is not violence or lawlessness, but love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice toward those who suffer within our country. Until next week, Randy and all of our listeners, this is Brereton Horne with a view from the outside, and with a reminder to all of our listeners to send feedback, as you've been doing, many of you, to the email address aviewfromtheoutside@hotmail.com. That's aviewfromtheoutside@hotmail.com. Randy, you have a very good Saturday, have a brilliant Sunday, and have a week ahead where the quest to eradicate lawlessness continues. All the best to you and all the listeners.
Thank you, Mr. Brereton Horne. Thank you, with a view from the outside. Thank you.